think one myth is that leaders or leadership have far more control or can somehow direct workplace culture. So, the CEO sits down with his team and he says, you know what? Our workplace culture is going to be A, B, and C. And we're going to get there, within a year. And then a year later, it goes back and they're like, yep, A, B, and C. That's exactly where we're at. It, I don't think it really works that way. I think it's far more dynamic. It's far more dyadic. It involves sort of discussions and and yeah, I think some people sort of because you see these like leadership books on culture and these kinds of things, and it's like, oh yeah, I read this book, Change the Culture. I'm not really sure that's that. I I've kind of come to subscribe to this idea of this like an archaeologist approach to workplace culture. And so what do archaeologists do is, they survey and then, they dig and then they take the debris away. And then over time and resources, they've got a Mayan temple that's, a Machu Picchu that's shining and, tons of tourists come and people want to visit it and these kinds of things.
Welcome to the Mental Health Show with Robert Grigore. I am your host, Robert Grigore. If you're new to following the channel or to who I am, I'm a registered clinical counselor as well as the founder and director of Grigore Counseling and Associates, and I'm an MDR certified EMDR therapist and approved EMDR consultant and a published author on EMDR. So lots of things on EMDR mental health. The show is really about an opportunity for myself and professionals that come onto the show that we're lucky enough to have to debunk some of the popular myths and misconceptions about mental health and really just bring it into the general talk and the general forum for discussion because it's part of our lives and we want to make it more accessible for everybody. That means, our audience member like yourself could either save money or save time or save a whole heck of a lot of pain and suffering just by really getting in touch with this mental health stuff. So thank you so much for tuning into the show. And today I'm extremely excited to have Loren Tisdelle join me on the show. And I did pronounce that correct, right?
You did, Robert. Yeah, Loren Tisdelle. Yeah.
Good, perfect. Loren helps organizations thrive through their most important asset, people. So he's passionate about delivering creative solutions that have a positive impact on workplace culture and safety and performance. And Loren is currently the director, human resources at Brier Home and Hospital, and is a chartered professional in human resources with over 15 years of experience as a healthcare executive. And Loren's also got an incredible track record of helping organizations reach excellent achievements that are really hard to get, by the way, such as accreditation with exemplary standing with Accreditation Canada, the CARF accreditation, as well as the Canadian Nonprofit Employee of Choice Award. Whew, that's a lot there. Loren, thank you so much for being here and for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Robert. It's great to be here and chat with you today about mental health.
I couldn't be happier. So I'm going to ask you, a couple of different questions about what it is specifically that you do, but I want to get a little bit, a little bit more personal so that people that are joining in get a real, sense of your personality and, where you've come from a little bit. So I'm really curious about how you got interested and sort of what pulled you into being interested in helping organizations with their human capital and their, what draw you to organizations?
Yeah, great. Thanks for asking, Robert. And again, good to be here. So I'm going to take this story a little way back to my undergraduate degree in psychology. Like you, Robert, undergrads in psych, really interested in social psychology. And then through my undergrad, became very interested in neuropsychology, neuroscience, and so interested that I wanted to become a neuropsychologist. So I was hustling through my undergrad, trying to get the biggest, highest GPA so that I could continue on with my school journey and applied to all the grad schools to become a neuropsychologist and didn't get accepted. right? Didn't get
Yes.
accepted. So sometimes, doors close and then other doors open.
Yeah.
And for me, the door to grad school closed, at least for the time being. And I entered the work world. And having this background, sort of education, neuropsychology, I started working with people with acquired brain injuries with an organization that supports acquired brain injury rehabilitation.
Wow.
And I got a lot of satisfaction around supporting individuals with gaining independence after an injury, and really grew with that organization. Started doing business development with them. We grew their organization like 50% over the 10 years that I was there. And my boss at the time, he said, "You be good at HR." He said, "I want you leading our HR." And so I slowly made transition from being a program manager to doing training and development, and then finally leading their HR department. And so I was there and 10 years, and I said, you know what, might be time to go, might be time to move on. I've been here for a long time. And then I had news that we were expecting twin
Wow.
boys. So I said, yeah, you know what? Forget this looking. I'm going to stay put for a little while. And you know what? When you sort of sometimes it's all about timing. When you sort of stop pursuing something, that's when people start knocking.
Yes.
And so I was contacted by a recruiter to come to Louis Brier Home and Hospital and met with the team here. And it was a really dynamic team, very enthusiastic team, an offer I couldn't refuse. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take this leap of faith and join Louis Brier. And I made the change, and within 2 months, my boys were born. And so crazy hectic time, but really rewarding time. And Louis Brier has just been a fantastic. I don't want to call it a playground, but it's been a fantastic organization to experiment, to try new things, to take risks, to be okay with failures, because the team here is very supportive of innovation and experimentation. And because they've been so supportive, I have a lot of wins. I have a lot of things that I do differently, but I also have a lot of wins through the time here. And yeah, so I've been here for the last 6 years. A little bit about Louis Brier. It's a long-term care home in Vancouver. We're in the heart of Vancouver. We were created to support Jewish seniors in the Jewish senior community. We have about 50% of our residents here are Jewish, 50% are not. And it's a very dynamic work environment. When people think about long-term care, they think, senior home, boring. We could film a Netflix season here and have tons of people tuning in to watch because
Yeah.
it's very dynamic, very active. We're constantly doing new things. If you follow our socials, at Louis Brier on Instagram, you'll see just what I'm talking about. Hashtag Louis Brier life, and you'll also see what work life is like here at Louis Brier as well.
Love
So
that.
yeah, I mean that's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about Louis Brier, and hopefully that sort of sets some of the context for our discussion today.
I really like that. But I like what a lot of the things that you said. And I think that, when people do hear the word, nursing home, unless they're a senior home, unless they have, somebody that's interested in that, area of their lives, or they themselves might be going, facing that, time of life, then, yeah, they would be interested. But if they're not, that would be, I don't know if this is for me, but I think in terms of, some of the context for this episode, what we're talking about is stuff that could work for any particular, organization whatsoever. Just so happens that this is where you're working right now. Tuning in, it's anybody that's either an employee of an organization, and there's also, the employer, so the executive board, listening in. Just so happens that this is the field. So I think, Louis Brier looks incredible. I took a peek at the website, and I saw all kinds of, amazing stuff. It looks like almost every day might be packed with something exciting. And so I'm kind of excited to to dive into that a little bit more and find out more about what it's like. Maybe actually tell our audience what would somebody that's coming in to live there at Louis Brier. Because it sounds like to me there's sort of two routes. It sounds like there's a hospital element and then there's also a residence element to it. So maybe you can give kind of the overview of what people are expecting when they do come to Louis Brier.
Yeah, so Louis Brier is it's considered a campus of care.
Cool.
And so we have a lot of different supports that are offered here. And so we have an assisted living facility. We have a multi-level care unit. We have a special care unit for folks with sort of higher levels of dementia. And then we have the home, which is sort of the bottom floor, people in intermediate care. And then we have the hospital, which is the second floor for folks with sort of extended care and sort of more acute needs. Over the last while, we've been noticing that most of the folks that come are a lot more acute than they used to be. The average length of stay has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter, even in my time here. So I think we know that this idea of the silver tsunami kind of coming, and we're here experiencing that within even our area. We know there's a shortage of long-term care beds, and so there's a major need. We have a quite a long wait list, and I think you're right. Like a lot of people don't necessarily think about senior care, senior homes until they have to support their parents with going into one, or they supported their grandmother with going into one, or something along those lines. And I think the reality is individuals our age are now more increasingly having to support not only their young family but also their parents and
Mm.
these kinds of things. And these are the exact issues that we're supporting our employees with, right? We know that our employees are sort of coming to work with not only the realities at hand of a really extremely hard job, but young kids that they need to get to school by a certain time and pick up by a certain time. And sometimes multi-generational homes. It's not just their parents, but it's their aunts and their uncles they're having to take care of. And very few people are really looking out for them, right? And that's where I think as employers, not just employers in healthcare, but employers generally, they're very well positioned to support employees and to create support systems for their employees, not only to sort of help their employees, but also to retain their employees and for their employees to feel sort of valued and want to work for an employer who actually cares for them.
I love that. It seems like we're sort of diving into some of what it's like to actually be there, to work there. And you mentioned some of the things, that incredibly difficult. I think it's actually probably not on the forefront of most people's minds is the actual staff and what it's like to to work here. I would imagine that nobody works for a facility like this just for the paycheck. I'm sure that's good too, but I'm sure that there's a meaning behind this. There's probably some deep passion in some way, shape, or form for this type of work. And as a therapist, I work with lots of first responders as well as other non or first responders that you might not quite consider as first responder, like a therapist, for example. We're on the front lines. Same with, I would imagine, the staff, that works one-on-one or directly with, the patients. Um, I am sure, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure that you've got some absolute gems of, patients that are just incredible, and everybody's going to be, has something quite special about them. But knowing a lot of, clients that I deal with have maybe, patients or their parents with dementia, it can be quite a challenging
Yeah.
dynamic, as the family members of the clients, the patients for the patients themselves, for the staff. I think we're talking about, quite a bit of mental health issues that are not necessarily seen. I imagine that it would take quite a toll to some degree on some of the staff, and I'm super curious. I think I'm diving ahead a little bit, but I'm just so curious to find out, like, what you mentioned that there's support and everything with Louis Brier. What kinds of ways do you help staff with those challenges that they might face mental health wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that, like the writing on the wall that often isn't necessarily spoken about is that in long-term care, people are coming here to die,
Yeah.
right? Like there's no way of sort of like fluffing that up. This is the last stop for a lot of folks,
Yeah.
and they're going to pass away here.
Yeah.
And our employees deal really with people dying on a regular basis. And so how does that sort of start to take a toll on some of the staff? And what can we do to sort of help them? Looking at work culture for me here, I'm always looking for ways to support people with escaping in like healthy ways, right? And ways to sort of recognize staff and show appreciation towards staff, and in a place where so for example, one of the initiatives that we have is we have a Louis Brier Life Day, which is once a month where we come together to celebrate life.
Cool.
Okay.
Like
And
that.
life, our values is chai. It's Hebrew for life,
Okay.
caring, health, safety, wellness, integrity, and accountability. That's chai. That's sort of the acronym for that. And so what we do is once a month we celebrate chai. We celebrate life on Louis Brier Life Day, which is the 18th of every month, which is also sort of symbolic because the 18th sort of refers to like L'Chaim and these kinds of things. So we've sort of tied in our value structure with an engagement event, which is this Louis Bar Life Day. On this day, we recognize 18 people. I don't, so when I say we, I mean the community recognizes 18 people. So like we've got managers recognizing care staff for going above and beyond. We have maintenance workers recognizing housekeeping staff and these kinds of things. And we do a public presentation during that day to sort of recognize people. Since we started this, we've probably recognized like more than 500 people, if not more. So just, a pat on the back, public recognition to say, hey, we did this. You can see these there. We go live on Facebook for this as well too for this. So you oftentimes see people who can't make and they're like, oh yeah, congratulations and these kinds of things. So it creates quite a buzz, and then people have their certificate placed on this recognition tree so that for all to see. And so once a month we do that. It's a ritual that we have here to celebrate life. Usually on that day we do a coffee with HR session where we do sort of empathetic interviews with folks to see how things are going, where we can improve upon, what we can do better, what people like, what people don't like. And then we also do some kind of wellness activity, like we'll bring in Zumba
Okay.
or Israeli folk dance, and we get people together to just let loose a little bit and have a little bit of fun, sweat a little bit, get a little bit of exercise, but to try to support people with just taking a minute out to be grateful, to show appreciation, and to get a little bit loose as well too, and have a little bit of fun.
I quite
Uh,
like.
yeah, I mean that's on like the fun side. We've also created very recently brought in what's called Schwartz rounds,
Okay.
which is a peer-to-peer, almost like a peer, I don't say like a peer group counseling type sessions. I'm not sort of characterizing it well, but more or less for care staff and other staff to share emotional experiences about their work life with others. So that people can sort of find sort of shared common ground on some of the emotional experiences that they're having at work. I'm pretty sure we're like one of the very few places in Western Canada, particularly in long-term care, that are doing these Schwartz rounds, and we're quite proud of that as a support for employees. And yeah, no, leaders are like not really necessarily to be included. It's more like of a grassroots kind of peer-to-peer counseling sort of thing like that. So yeah.
Well, I really like that for a couple of reasons. Two things I want to point, highlight what you said. One of them is the Schwartz rounds from a crisis standpoint. You're you're creating this dynamic that if there is a crisis, there's already a support network ahead of time. So I kind of like that quite a bit because it also in order to deal with any type of stressor, and any work environment's a stressor. It doesn't matter what it is that you do, whether you're punching numbers or you're dealing with dying people. Like it's there's a stressor regardless. And I think that having, it was called community engagement, within the dynamic, it actually brings our nervous system down to a green zone, if you will. I'll put a chart up in a moment regarding, there's three different dynamics of our nervous system. One is that the green, social connection, social engagement, and then there's the fight or flight, and then there's like total collapse and freeze mode up here. And so you're really encouraging, support within the community of Louis Brier, which I love that. So if there is a crisis that happens or somebody is taking something a little extra hard than they might already, this would be a great, you already have the tools, it's already there. So I love that. Hats off. I'm not wearing one, but I'd hats off to you guys. The other one that I want to point out is this public validation. As you're acknowledging people publicly, you're putting their name up. It really highlights one of those intrinsic needs that we as human beings have. We're a social creature, right? We don't go away. I mean, like it's damaging to our mental health, to our physical health to just go away and be isolated. So to be acknowledged within a social context, it really helps. One of the primary needs that any human being has is to be seen, heard, valued, known, to be known, to know others, to really feel like they matter. So I love that there is that dynamic there. So it seems like there's a lot of things that are going really well within the organization. And I want to kind of zoom in now to some of those myths that we might find, within this the general sphere of culture, the general idea of organizational psychology, organizational, culture. And I imagine there has to be some sort of myth or something that you've out of the time that you've been doing this, you've come across. So could you share if you kind of think of one or two that pop out for you as things that are myths or something that you like to debunk with us?
Yeah, I mean, again, these are sort of my feelings. Whether or not other people agree is it's sort of up to
Of
them.
course.
But I think one myth is that leaders or leadership have far more control or can somehow direct workplace culture. So, the CEO sits down with his team and he says, you know what? Our workplace culture is going to be A, B, and C, and we're going to get there, within a year. And then a year later, it goes back, and they're like, "Yep, A, B, and C. That's exactly where we're at." It I don't think it really works that way. I think it's far more dynamic. It's far more dyadic. It involves sort of discussions and and yeah, I think some people sort of because you see these like leadership books on culture and these kinds of things, and it's like, oh yeah, I read this book, Change the Culture. I'm not really sure that's that. I I've kind of come to subscribe to this idea of this like an archaeologist approach to workplace culture. And so what do archaeologists do is, they survey and then, they dig and then they take the debris away. And then over time and resources, they've got a Mayan temple that's, a Machu Picchu that's shining and, tons of tourists come and people want to visit it and these kinds of things. So in my opinion, we've had more success at sort of looking for glimmers of looking for sort of something that shines and wipe away the debris, wipe away the bureaucracy, wipe away the barriers, and let that shine through.
Hmm.
So I've got like a few examples of that. Let me talk about one example that didn't go so well, where I thought, this is the program. I know it all. This is going to be the best,
I
and it
love these
totally
stories.
fell flat.
Okay,
Okay.
I love this.
And I think other people might have experience with this as well too. Early when I started, we came up with this idea of a recognition award program. Once a year, we would recognize people under certain categories, sensational care, mission, vision, and values advocate, and sort of a few others like that. I think we had 6 categories by the end of it, family's choice. And nevertheless, what we would do is people would vote or people would submit their nominations, and then a committee would choose who would be the winner, and a few people would win under each category. And we would put this event on to recognize these folks, and they would be very happy. They would be super happy. But then everyone else would be like, why them? Why not me?
Right.
Why, why is this the case? Is there favoritism going on?
Hey,
And then it was one of those ones where like the committee that was putting this on was like, wow, this like isn't really going as well as we thought. And then we said, well, what do people actually want? And then we asked around, and what they wanted was just an event, like an off-site event where everyone got together. We just celebrate everything and everyone. And so we started doing that. We said, forget this recognition program. We already have the recognition tree. They can recognize each other. Let's put on this off-site event. We did a masquerade ball party last November. It was great. Everyone loved it. And then this year in November, we're going to do like an 80s style, 80s party kind of extravaganza thing with long service awards and a dance competition. And so when you start to think about like asking, well, what do people want? And what's the culture that already exists? What are the beliefs? What are the rituals? What are the sort of customs that are already happening here? And how can we sort of unlayer them? Another good example, we have people here who love to perform, and there's a lot of talents here. And so a few years ago, we created a program called Louis Brier's Got Talent as part of a nursing week.
I love it.
And we have like 50 some odd people sign up for this Louis Brier's Got Talent, and you can see videos of this on YouTube as well too. And people just show up and perform. And
Just the staff, or is it the clients as well as patients?
it's the staff. It's the staff that come and they sort of show their talents, and it's we find more and more times where it's like, oh, they're interested in doing this. Like, let's just help them do that, right? We have a some people who started a running club, and it was like, well, how can I help you with this? Okay, well, maybe we'll buy you hats to like create team cohesion. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, maybe we can support with the sun run, and really,
Mhm.
really looking at like an archaeologist would, looking at sort of surveying, finding those spots where something could be promising, and then excavating, get rid of the debris, get rid of the bureaucracy, and let the current culture sort of shine. So I think kind of going back is like where leaders think that, yeah, I can create that culture. I'll tell you what, there's already a culture. It already exists. Let
Yes.
that shine, right? So, yeah.
That is super helpful. I'm thinking even, from both sides, as the employee, how do you know that you're in a good culture? That's happening, right? The leaders are listening and they're asking questions. And I think, in terms of, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of business owners and CEOs and different, and I've found that so often when mental health is going very well within that individual, but also within the culture of the organization, I've noticed that there's a removal, there is a vulnerability that's allowed, the leaders, whatever that may be, management or executive managers, but they're real people. Right. And like one, and this isn't really my field too much, as you're more of an expert here than I am. But I'm thinking about, I think there was a story about Howard Schultz. He's the Starbucks CEO. And I remember, way back, I think it was 2008 or 2007 or something when it was. But Starbucks was like, they were struggling hardcore and they weren't doing well. And I remember the story that, at least this is what I read, that he just, took off, he got off his high chair and said, look, we are struggling. And if you guys have any suggestions of what we can do, I'm paraphrasing, I'm all ears. And that was an opportunity that the actual team, the crew of that ship actually, took over and helped and became something, what it is today. And say what you will about Starbucks. I like my Starbucks, but anyway, but I love this idea that your ex could be actually looking to see what's already here. What can we extract from this? And I heard, the leaders are listening. What is it that you need? How can we help? I love that question. How can I be of service to you? And I just think that's such a, probably a lifelong or a career long question that somebody
Mhm.
could continue to ask. Like day
Yeah.
one of the job, hey, how can I help you? Like, what do you need right now? And
Yeah.
day, you know, 10 years in, 15, 20 years in, what do you need? Like, what can I help you? On the when they leave even, like, what can I how can I help you? Thanks for
Yeah.
your service. What do you need now? That just sounds like such a beautiful opportunity.
I think that can sort of happen in many aspects of life as far as, how can I help? Where can I add value for you right now? Where can I sort of support? I took an executive MBA at Robin School of Management a couple of years in their healthcare and life sciences program. And one of the modules was human-centered business design. And human-centered business design, typically people, you think about products, like how can I design this product to, really be, you think about the iPhone, immaculate product, a lot of human-centered business design went into that. And I approached my MBA from the lens of HR and from the lens of like, people strategies and these kinds of things. I started thinking to myself, well, what if we started to apply human-centered business design to like workplace culture and to HR and sort of co-create with our people, right? And
Mm,
that kind of really resonated with me with this idea of like, if you were to say put a product out, you didn't do any consultation, you didn't sort of work on prototypes and how are people reacting to this, and you just put it out, it would be a giant failure. And
done
so
that.
yeah, right. And so why do we think that sort of people strategies will land the same without doing some testing and working with people and seeing what people need in and around that? And so I think using some of those principles that maybe apply to products, but all to also sort of services and at the end of the day, HR employers, they're providing a service to their consumers, but employers are also providing a huge service to their employees.
Yeah.
And I think that shift in focus to say, hey, yeah, these are our customers, but we're also servicing our employees makes a really big difference because when you start to think about your employees as folks that you're there to support and service, you're then looking after their health. You're looking after their well-being. You're looking after their mental health. They're not just a commodity. They're people who you want to support.
Mhm.
And we've done a lot of work at Louis Brier, working on how do we go about supporting our people. And going back to that sort of archaeology approach to excavating, like that analogy also suggests that you need resources to do these kinds of things. And I don't want people to think, well, yeah, I can just, I'll change work culture off the side of my desk or shape work culture off the side of my desk. I want to tell you a little bit of a story. My wife and we were in Belize maybe about 5 or so years ago. We visited this small town called San Ignacio. It's kind of at the corner of Guatemala. A lot of people go to San Ignacio to sort of go to the ruins in and around that area. And so we went to a ruin that was just sort of walking distance from this town, and it was a small ruin. But what they were saying was that it was just the tip of the iceberg, and that if they had the resources, it could be one of the biggest ruins, in the world, like a Machu Picchu or something along those lines. But they just didn't have the resources to sort of excavate. And
Mm,
I want to use that analogy because we can't assume that we can do all these great things without resourcing. And so one of the positions that we resource is a coordinator for attendance, wellness, and engagement. And
mm,
so this coordinator specifically supports employees to promote their attendance, which essentially pays for this position because if people are at work and they're not calling in sick, it's less sick leave, and that more or less pays for the position.
yeah.
But in addition to that, they also coordinate the engagement activities and they coordinate the wellness activities. So I'm not, while I may sort of lead and sort of support in some of these areas, I'm not the one necessarily doing some of this stuff off the side of my desk. We understand that there's a need there. We understand that there's a benefit there. And so we put our money where our mouth is and we resource it, and it pays for itself in kinds. Not only does it employ someone in a great job that the individual loves, but it supports the health and well-being of our workforce, which is key. And this individual does like wellness check-ins when they know that there might be sort of something going on with the person. If there's sort of like a series of absences, they'll sort of check in on that person. And oftentimes we may see something like, say, for instance, someone doesn't show up for work,
Hmm.
right? Which happens in healthcare. People can, they just don't show up for their shift.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, oh, they're being reckless or forgetful and, careless or whatnot. And when you meet with these folks, it's like, it's no, they tend to have, maybe they're trying to balance two jobs. Maybe they have substance use issues and something happened and they couldn't make it to school or sorry, make it to work. Maybe
Yeah.
they're, having to drop their kids off at school and drop their parents off at like medical appointments and these kinds of things, and it slipped their mind.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have things going on for them. And I think employers are quick to maybe see behaviors, tip of the iceberg, make a judgment. But when you actually have a chat with the individual,
Yeah.
it tends to be a symptom of something else going on. And I think having a culture where we balance accountability. Yeah, if you're absent for a number of times, we're going to have a conversation with you, not because you're in trouble, but because we care. And we do a fantastic job of, in my opinion, of balancing this idea of balancing accountability with empathy. Because at the end of the day, that's your support system. Think about your family. Your family, they have a lot of empathy, but they're going to hold you accountable for sure.
Right.
So,
Well, I really like that because, as you're saying that, I'm thinking the word curiosity, empathy, and curiosity. That like, so you've got kids. I've got two little ones. One's probably coming home from school any second now, and they're young, 5 and 2, and I know that part of the environment in order for these my children to feel safe enough to tell me what's going on for them. It starts very early to talk. I'm not a child psychologist. I have on my team, I have associates that work with children, but I know that we got to create an environment that feels secure enough for that individual to come and speak. And I think this is the same dynamic, with regards to the workplace. It is like a family. I've had a lot of professionals talk to me about that this is like a family. And if you're in a secure family, right? Everything's great and you lean on each other and there's empathy and I love that. What's actually going on? Talk to me about what do you need here? Like how can we help you? That's such a different approach than, one strike, two strike, three strike, you're out. See you later. Find a new job. That doesn't create that security for the other employees as well, right? And so I love that. And I think maybe we can dive into so it sounds like for the most part it sounds like you guys are a really functional family here that's doing really well. I'm curious, what would you imagine some of the dysfunctional family dynamics of an organization? How would you know that there's a problem, right? You're coming in as this employer that hierarchical, we know everything, it's our way or the highway. How would you start to notice that there's some cracks in the hull here in the ship?
interesting. Your brain sort of that sort of got me thinking of are we applying attachment theory to employer-employee relations?
We might be.
Like avoidant attachment styles, people who will stand off it. I mean,
I think so.
that's a whole other topic and one that I'll have to kind of explore on the next bike ride I take. But but yeah, I mean, as far as I mean, I've seen it here to some extent. There was a bit of a turnaround when it came down to the morale and the shift here. Prior to me, there were 11 other HR. Rumor has it, I never actually fact checked this, but rumor has it there were 11 other HR people prior to me in like 2 or 3 years or something along those lines.
Okay.
And so there was turnover, and even when I started, people were like, "Well, we'll see if you stay. We'll see if you kind of stay in these kinds of things."
Okay.
And I think you saw it. You saw it in sort of gossip. You saw it in sort of low morale and like apathy. A lot of people maybe sort of viewing things a little bit more kind of negatively, like, oh, that's not going to work, that's not going to work, sort of thing. And I think the clearest ones is sort of like apathy, like pessimism,
Mhm.
and like this idea of sort of we distrust people, and so that might be people don't come to leadership, rumors kind of start and these kinds of things. And I think I think in an organization, you can usually feel it. Like it's kind of a bit of a gut feeling. Sometimes there'll be like actual incidences or things that, do make it to your desk that need to be investigated and these kinds of things. But I think generally you can feel it if you enter an organization. And I think many of us have entered organizations just in our sort of consumer life where we're like, yeah, something doesn't sit well here.
Right.
And the same can be true in healthcare facilities and organizations. So it does take it takes time. It takes a lot of time to turn things around and to start to rebuild trust. And yeah, I'm not gonna suggest that I've got all the answers in that regard. I think every organization requires its own kind of unique approach and unique style. But I think admitting that there is an issue, I think is probably one of the best places to start.
Yeah.
And then again, offering like how can we go about co-creating and you may not like the work dynamic here. I may not like the work dynamic here. How can we go about creating a better work dynamic? What does that look like for you? And sort of how can we help?
Wow. Wow. Um, um, what you're describing there, and I think you said that you might not know all the answers, and I think that that's actually one of the things that I look for when I trust people. Does the person feel like they have all the answers? Then I'm not like we're not going down that route because if it as you, I think my personal experience, I think as you move up, the more I learn about something, I realize I don't know. Then there's so much more, and I think we when you're running an organization like mine is very small comparatively, right? I've got a smaller team of people. It's not I can literally sit down and I can talk to every one of my associates, and it could take me an hour and I can get kind of what's going on for everybody. But when and I get the impression that Louis Brier is pretty big at this point, right? You've got, a lot of staff, you've got a lot of residents, you got a lot going on. But I also imagine like what would a leader do at like 500 employees size, like how do we get the finger on the pulse to find out what's really going on for some of these employees that if they're apathetic or they're pessimistic, like how do you go about actually having that dialogue?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So to put things into perspective, we have about 450 employees here. So you're sort of pretty close there.
Wow.
Companions as well too. We have a companion program, about 300 residents, and
Wow.
then some volunteers, and all the families and everything that sort of comes down to that. So it's very dynamic. There on any given day, there's a lot going on. That's why I'm saying Netflix might be interested in shooting some reality TV.
I do know some people. Maybe I can make a connection
They
there.
might be interested. But I think it's like you have to walk around and you have to get to know people, right? You really have to get to know, spend some time in the staff lounge. People are surprisingly will share a surprisingly a lot amount of information if you ask and you show you're curious and show that you're interested in these kinds of things. And so early on, we were doing sort of town halls for any kind of significant change. We still do sort of general staff meetings once a month or so. We're kind of getting people's feedback, creating an environment where you can email anyone at any time and get a
Mhm.
response. People will email our CEO, and he might be the fastest one to respond to anyone around here. Go David.
Yeah.
So there's this idea that everyone's sort of accessible. We may not necessarily be available all the time. I spend a lot of time in my office. I have to walk around to say, go to the lunchroom, warm my food up, go to the bathroom, and these kinds of things. And even during those interactions, it's like, everything good? Yeah, yeah, everything's great. Anything not good? No, everything's great. Thanks for asking, sort of thing. And I have to like walk the halls to get to my office. I'm literally in the middle of a hospital. And during that walk, it's like, hey, so and so, hey, so and so, just making eye contact with people, and I see you, you see me. Need anything, everything going okay. I think those small interactions start to build up where they're like, yeah, I can trust this guy. What he says he'll follow through on. I know I can go to him and get some traction and these kinds of things, and that really starts to build trust and confidence and now I know that if someone has an issue and they can't really resolve it, they're going to email me or they're going to email one of my team members, and hopefully we'll be able to help them with that. But that takes time. Like it really takes time to put yourself out there, to let people know you're available, to get people trusting you, and then naturally in a place like this, they tell their friends. They're like, no, no, I went to Loren. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Don't no need to be intimidated and these kinds of things. So we'll have new people that start and they'll be like, oh, they get a little bit of nerves in front of me, and within a week they've got their guard down and it's okay. Like we're all people here. I look at organizations as like, let's take the hierarchy out. It's not needed most of the time. If it is, maybe there's efficiencies there, but I'm just someone here to do a job. You're here to do a job. I'm here to do a job. Let's all do our jobs like to the best of our ability. Because if we all do that and we're all rock stars, this place is going to be great, right? So that's really sort of the place I take it from. And I think when people know there's not sort of ego or like power interest and these kinds of things, we start to create an environment where, hey, yeah, we are all in this together. He's one of us. He's on our team. He can help and these kinds of things. And it creates openness and safety and productivity, which I think is a big piece of this too.
Oh, I love that. And I think the big word for me that I'm thinking of is consistency. That you're the same person every day for the last several years, like so that people know what they're going to get. I mean, you're
Yeah,
going to say, "Hey, you're good. What's not good? Tell me. I'm here for you." And then people talk. It's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of an organization, even in a family, right?
yeah,
You're gonna talk. And so, if it's the same story that they're sharing, Lauren was great, or, HR was great, or CEO was great, whoever they top person talked to, they listened, they cared about me, they helped me solve my problem, then that's like for, like a therapist, the best advertising is word of mouth, right? So if,
for sure.
somebody's saying, trust Lauren, he's a great guy, helped me with my problem, then that goes a long, long way. And then trust is already built, and you don't have to work extra hard for that person to trust. I love that. It sounds
Yeah.
wonderful.
I think that's key. I think this idea of integrity, you mentioned sort of consistency. And I think when people are consistent, it's that familiarity. You're like, yeah, I know what I'm going to get, right? I think that's huge. That's I think really, really key.
Mhm.
And I think work ethic too. I think when people know you're going to work just as hard as they do, it speaks volumes as well too. I think goes a really long way because the folks here, they work incredibly hard. And I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try to work just as hard as they do to make their life just a little bit better working here. So
That's so huge. I think, for employees to come in and, they're not seeing your feet on the desk and, you're reading a book or something. Like it's they people we learn with mirror neurons in our system that we follow what our example that we see. And so one of my favorite things is seeing a big Chinese restaurant chain that I used to go to in Ontario called the Mandarin. And there's a couple of one in Toronto, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but
I do.
I saw the owner. He was definitely the owner of that location. I don't know if he was the president of the whole organization. He's sweeping, and I thought, wow. So if he can sweep and run this, hats off. So to know that that you're putting in the effort, and employees see management and leadership working hard. I think that's just terrific. I want to talk a little bit about some of the other areas of expertise that you work in, and we'll just sort of just kind of go in there a little bit because you
Sure.
mentioned there's a couple of key areas that you talk about, workplace culture, engagement, and performance, strategy development and execution, employer branding, employer relations, labor relations, investigations. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of, very technical terms here. And so I'm curious, if somebody, were to hire an HR professional like yourself, from an organization that's struggling, they've got gossip, they've got all these different, they're aware that things are breaking down. How would you go about actually helping to direct or redirect that ship?
Yeah, good question. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to sort of like defining the problem. Like
Yes.
what really is the problem? And I think what was the sort of famous saying, spend 80% of your time. No, I think it was 90% of your time on the problem, 10% on the solution. Was that Einstein, I think? Taking that approach, I think you have to go in and really define what the actual problem is in order in order to start working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that could look like interviews with staff. That could look like town halls. That could look like satisfaction surveys.
Right.
I think all of those sort of have their own unique, kind of get your own unique info from each of those. Depends if you sort of want, quantitative or sort of qualitative info.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think being curious about finding what the problem is, doing your investigation, then doing your analysis and then kind of coming up with solutions is probably the way to go. But if someone were to call me and say, we've got this like a morale issue, just people just seem to be kind of down in the dumps, a little apathetic, I would probably start by doing sort of a general survey, seeing what sort of some of the trends are, and then maybe workshopping in sort of small groups to sort of dive in a little bit deeper into some of the themes. And what I would do is I would engage with employees to come up with the solutions as well, because I think when people come up with the solutions, there's more buy-in than, I mean, after all, they came up with it, right?
Yes.
So,
Love
and I
that.
think that's kind of key is to sort of look at it as we're not going to take this problem away and fix it for you. Like this is a collective problem. Like you don't want to come to an organization that has low morale. We want to
Right.
make this place great. And if you don't want to, then maybe, maybe maybe you want to go to a place that isn't great, but like
Yeah.
let's make this place great together.
Yes.
Right. And I think that is key because people want to come to work. They want to have fun. They want to have in my experience, they want something with purpose, which healthcare is great because there's purpose everywhere. I don't have to manufacture it, it's here.
Mm.
And people want to have fun and they want to have friends and community and a sense of enjoyment. And so when I think about HR, I think about, okay, what kind of employment experience are we giving people? Right? It's like it's an experience. It's like a user experience, but an employee experience, right? And so I kind of look at it that way, and maybe kind of through that problem definition, trying to resolve it. It's like, what kind of experience do you want? Like, what's your best case situation as an employee here? Okay, you want it to look like this. How are we going to do? How are we going to make it like this? What does that look like? How do we get there together and these kinds of things? So definitely like let's build this together versus like, oh, this is the problem. Like these are the solutions.
I love that. I think that's a very astute way of looking at whatever's going on. And I would ask a very similar question to my, an individual client, like where do you want to go? What does this look like when this is done? Right? It's the same thing. What kind of environment do you want to work in? Like what does it actually look like? And I like using all those senses as well too. Like what does it look like, smell like, feel like? Like what's
Yeah.
the vibe here that you really want in, to work? I think when you think about like a workplace, how many hours a week are people actually putting into their work? It's more than they're spending at home with their family usually, right? So like a good portion of our lives are spent in this place. So how would you like to exist in this place? I think that's just terrific. So I think it's actually kind of leading us towards a little bit, like a tip. I want to, you can think about a tip or a suggestion. I want both sides too. So not just the employer, but also the employee. So whoever's, consuming this. So maybe first we'll start with the employer. So if there's, what is a tip? Maybe I've already said it because we kind of went there a little bit, but what would you suggest for an employer? What's one thing if they took only one thing out of this whole, interview? What would you suggest that they do?
We hear a lot about sort of this idea, sort of authentic leadership and these kinds of things, and while this sort of may kind of touch on that, I think look for opportunities where you can admit a mistake or admit that you could have done something better. Like
Right.
that is just, and I've seen that happen so many times from leaders across this organization where I remember this one individual I worked with. He came to me, peers at the time. He was a manager, and he came to me, and he had put his foot in his mouth, like huge no. And it wasn't just his mouth; it was in writing, so it was
Oh.
like all to see across the entire organization. And he was just distraught, and he was like, "I can't believe this. People are talking about it." And I said, "This is a fantastic opportunity for you because you are going to gain so much credibility and so much people see that you're authentic when you take ownership over this and say it was bad judgment and it shouldn't have happened and you've learned from it and moving forward you'll do something differently." And he did that. He sent an email saying, it was like a bad call. I shouldn't have done that. And the emails that flooded in for him saying, it's okay, and these kinds of things, and he built trust.
Oh,
People looked at him as though, oh, he makes mistakes too. A guy that you never think make mistakes, let alone admit mistakes,
yes.
took ownership to it. And what does that do? It tells other people that, look, everyone makes mistakes. This is a safe space. If you make a mistake, you can bring that forward. It's okay. Not only that, you can take a risk
Yes.
because if you make a mistake, it's not going to be the end of the world.
No.
Right. And I think you really create a sort of psychologically safe place when that happens. And where a lot of people are sort of fearful to admit mistakes, I suggest that people look out, like, where can you take accountability and say, you know what? I totally should have done that differently. And you'll find that people will start to perceive you differently and things start to change. And you know what you notice? Other people start doing the same thing. I totally should have done that differently. I'm going to take ownership over that. And you really start to see a change when everyone does starts to do that. The ego kind of goes. When something happens, it's not like, crickets. Everyone's like, oh, who did it? No, I did it. That's
Yeah.
on me. Yeah,
Yeah. I
exactly.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you start to see people, and then you start to see two people saying, "Oh no, that was me. No, oh no, that was me." And that's kind of the culture where we want is, let's
Amazing.
take accountability. It's okay. What's the lesson learned? Oh, okay. Well, that's great. That's the lesson learned. And
Oh, I so love that. I think of, one of my leader clients, had mentioned, the hardest thing about, entrepreneurship are the people, from her perspective. And I just think that what a wonderful antidote, to help anybody that's in that position, that's feeling the same thing, to be, authentic and just, admit mistakes, just be that best version of yourself that you want your employees to see, how you want them to be, model it, and then those mirror neurons are going to kick in and they're going to start to see it and you're going to change that culture. I think in many ways it does come from the top, if you want to call it that, where you're allowing her to be vulnerable, authentic, make mistakes, accountable. I think that's a terrific tip. Thank you for that. And then what about for the employee? So if the employee happens to be obviously not in your organization, but some other organization that's like really, it's not going well, or what's a tip that they can do? Because I think as an employee, you might feel like you have much less power than the employer would. So what can somebody that's in that position, what could they do to try to make their experience in their organization a little bit better?
workplaces are dynamic, right? And I'm a firm believer that you get what you give.
Hmm.
And here's a good example. I had an employee come to me and they said, you know what? People just haven't been friendly. They're not friendly to me. And I walk the halls and no one really says hi to me, and I said, okay, are you open to trying something? Yeah, I'm open to trying something. How about for the next week, you say hi to everyone that you see? Let's just do an experiment to see. And
Love
what do
that.
you think about that? Was that something you'd be interested in? Yeah, I'll try it. I'll try it. They try it and they come back and they said, everyone is saying, everyone's saying hi to me now. I'm like, you get what you give. This recognition tree program, people say, I don't get, no one's recognizing me. So forget about that's like half of the side is like half of the side is getting recognition. The other half is recognizing. Let's start with the recognizing piece. Okay, I'm going to start recognizing people. This person recognizes a few people. The next month they're being recognized, right? So it's like you really in a as an employer, I'm here to provide a certain experience and certain resources and certain supports and these kinds of things. As an employee, you can come and just do the work. That's fine. But if you come and do the work and join our running club and join the Dragon Boat team and join the Zumba, I guarantee you're going to have a way better experience here. And you get what you give. If you go around and you say hi to everyone, if you show up to the potlucks and these kinds of things, you become so much part of a community. And that community becomes bigger and better and greater. So if everyone just shows up and gives a bit of themselves,
Yeah.
then everyone is better off. And we see that across the board here. We see people who may not have been very open, and over time they start to open up, and they start to open up a little bit more and a little bit more. And next thing you know, they're doing stand-up comedy at this Louis Brier's Got Talent, and
Amazing.
everyone's like, "Oh, they do comedy?" Right. And that's the thing when you can start to build, when everyone starts to kind of put their ego aside, let's just kind of be ourselves. Let's like put some work into this environment. And like let's care, let's kind of show up every day. The Everything starts to build and the work environment becomes way, way greater than you could ever imagine. And so show up when you show up for work, just give a little bit of yourself every day. If you can give your all, but maybe give a little bit more than you typically would. Join a committee, introduce yourself to someone, make a new friend, sit with someone at the lunch table that you wouldn't necessarily, and that you'll reap the rewards. You really will.
Oh, I love that. The song "Give a Little Bit" is in my head right as you said that. I
Yeah.
think it's like a great motto. I'm curious, maybe you feel okay to share, what do you do? What does Lauren do to, with you manage your mental health and to sort of stay afloat with all the challenges that you have every day?
Yeah, I have really good work life boundaries. I don't use work life balance. I don't believe in this idea that you can balance work and life. I don't believe that.
Like
I
that.
look at work life integration,
Nice.
right? So how do you integrate the two? And so I have really good boundaries for that. I may leave work a little bit earlier, work a little bit more in the evenings, and these kinds of things to sort of integrate it that way. I think that's important. I don't think you can always be on, and so shutting off, I think, is really important. Two, uh, bike rides.
Ah,
That is my wife asked me, do you ever think about like joining like a bike club, like a bike group?
right.
Like, no, no. My bike time is for me, movement, thought. I come up with most of my good ideas when riding a bike. I just find it extremely therapeutic. My moods always is different once I come off from a bike ride.
Uh-huh.
And number three, Survivor date nights with my wife. I think
Okay.
that huge Survivor fan. They still exist. There's
That,
still a
that,
lot of
that was
Survivor fans out
that
there.
was the Survivor TV show, not Surviving Date Nights, just in case it.
Nice one, nice one,
Well,
Robert. Yeah, no, Survivor date nights
that's fantastic.
with the wife. Yeah, so we'll watch that maybe once a week when we can. And I just find that like kind of time to reconnect, I think is important, particularly for couples, right?
Yes.
And obviously, family time and these kinds of things, it's a lot to balance with young kids and a professional life, and all the things is a lot to balance. But I think carving out time for each one of those is very important and time well spent.
Oh, I love that. Those are wonderful suggestions and tips for people too, I think, listening in and watching in. So I really appreciate that. I want to thank you, Lauren, for being part of the show and sharing your expertise. And obviously, there's we'll put some links to the website for your own website as well as Louis Brier's website. And is there any other resources or anything like that that you want to share with the audience?
Have a look at my website. I have a number of talks on there where I've done some public speaking and whatnot. You might find some overlap in some of the conversation today, but also some sort of new thoughts and new ways to think about things. So definitely check those out.
Awesome. Is there any last minute things that you want to share with the audience? One final message?
Yeah, I mean, just like I do with the employees here, I just want to put it out to your audience members and anyone else online that my door is wide open for you. My email is wide open. Reach out if you have any questions, if you have any comments, you want to learn more about something. I am more than happy to help and share and chat, and I'm here for you if you need anything, for sure.
I love that. Thank you so much, Lauren. And thank you, audience, for joining us. If you liked what you consumed here today, please like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave us a review. It helps more people see this type of content. So thank you very much for sharing some time with us. It really means the world to me. And likewise, doors open. Let us know, comment, and we'll answer as best we can. So thank you very much for being a part of the show, Lauren, and thank you, audience, for tuning in. And I'll see you in the next episode.